Thanks for attending our talk. It's very exciting to be here at this Digital Scholarship Conference. So, taking a look around this gorgeous library on our way in, it's a very different situation than what we have at Wayne State. And that's why we thought this panel might be of value to a lot of people, because not all schools have the same levels of resources. Not everyone can afford a digital humanities center or invest in a lot of technological tools or gadgets. We do have a nice technological infrastructure, but I wanted to talk more about sort of building infrastructure in your library and how to build partnerships with faculty today. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then Tracy will talk about her experiences as a faculty member and what she, as an assistant professor who's interested in digital projects, would like to do, and what she would hope to get out of a library collaboration. And then Janine Lanza is going to talk about an actual case study that she is of a project that she's doing with our digital publishing staff at Wayne State University Library. So to start, a bit about my background. I'm a user experiences librarian at Wayne State, and I'm not my professional responsibilities don't have anything to do with the history department. I'm a science librarian. I've been a medical librarian for a number of years, worked in hospitals, and I currently support the College of Nursing at Wayne State University. And since EndNote is so heavily entrenched in the medical community, it has become my de facto responsibility to teach EndNote to the university community, essentially. And I realized that people would also be interested in Zotero, Mendeley, these other sorts of digital tools. So I started preparing programs on that and going out mostly to the College of Nursing, but also other departments around campus, including history. I'm also a graduate student in the history department, so I sort of wear two hats. And that's how I know Dr. Neumann and Dr. Lanza, originally not through the library, but through my graduate studies. So they asked me to come and teach Zotero at a history colloquium. And they followed up with asking for some one-on-one. And we got to talking about digital tools, and I heard from them that they were interested in doing some digital projects, but did not know where to turn in the university. I said, oh, well, you should come to the library. We're very interested in this. This is an initiative, a place where libraries are going. And that is how our relationship began, and I thought it was a very fortuitous beginning, because even though it's not in my formal science liaison role, as a liaison, I was able to go back to our library administration and say, hey, there's some faculty members interested in doing these sorts of projects, and this is where we want to take it. And I was able to connect both of them with our digital publishing staff, who also do a lot of scholarly communications advising. So it's a lot of copyright as well as digital publishing is housed together in Wayne State Libraries. And I have spent time working with those staff members to develop a set of services that we can offer to faculty at Wayne State, advising, some programming capabilities, but mostly we want to do one-on-one consultations. So the practical value that I thought that this would bring to a lot of people, hopefully, is that you can assess demand and build partnerships through a liaison model to start a digital humanities program or digital scholarship. And it doesn't have to start with technological tools. It doesn't have to start with a lot of programming know-how on behalf of librarians. You can work with the liaisons that you have. And we all, not everybody has taken programming classes, or we all have different levels of familiarity with technology tools, different programs, different ways to do digital scholarship. And by leveraging your existing liaison program, you can reach out to faculty. So the Horizon report on liaison, changing liaison roles came out last year, and it demonstrated that liaison roles are changing a great deal in the face of technological changes, in the face of ebooks. Libraries are far less collection-oriented and much more service-oriented. And a good way to change liaison roles is to base new roles on interests. So any librarian who is particularly interested in digital scholarship can start to incorporate more of that into their job responsibilities, which I have asked to do, and I've been supported by my library administration in doing that. So this is sort of also a library test case in getting a program like this off the ground, but also in transforming your library to accommodate the needs of your faculty and students as well. So I mentioned the liaison and the digital publishing infrastructure. And, excuse me, those are the places that we chose as a library to house our digital scholarship support services. It seemed to be a natural fit since our digital publishing staff would be the ones doing most of the technical support. They're the ones who maintain our institutional repository. Also, we host a platform where faculty can publish digital journals. We're working on publishing digital ebooks, things like that. So, and those staff were very excited to do it. And we're sort of playing it by ear, trying to assess demand across the university, deciding what level of service we can offer. Obviously, we can't accommodate a huge glut of projects, but we certainly can accommodate, we can consult on a number of projects and at least point people in the right direction. So the main points that I wanted to communicate were that you can leverage your existing liaison model to support digital humanities. You can harness librarian interest in digital scholarship to provide some support services and get the word out, and find support from your administration to at least get a program up off the ground and running. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Neumann to talk about digital projects and her experiences with the library.
Great. So I am in my 4th year as an assistant professor at Wayne State, and I don't have much experience in digital humanities, but it's something I've been increasingly interested in, both for my own research as I develop a second project. I'm an urban historian, so they're obvious. I'm very interested in spatial history. I've been following sort of what the spatial history lab that Stanford is doing. Obviously, Wayne State does not have the kind of resources that Stanford does, right? I'm assuming most people's institutions don't. So for my own research, I'm interested in that sort of stuff. But a lot of our graduate students, thinking ahead to the job market, are very interested in developing sort of a digital humanities portfolio. We're developing a public history program in which we would like to, well, I'm teaching an intro to public history class for the first time next semester for graduate students, in which we would like to have digital components. And I don't have a lot of expertise in this area. I would say I have no expertise in this area, right? I could probably put together a WordPress blog, and I took a GIS class once 10 years ago. So initially, I went to our CNIT, what is that, Computer and Information Technology?
Network.
Yes, which was where I was sort of sent within the university for anything having to do with digital or online tools. And it turns out that, you know, as we've had budget problems, they are very focused on Blackboard and only Blackboard. So if you want to do something kind of outside the confines of Blackboard, they can't help you. And sort of asking around as to where in the university I could go to find these kinds of resources, it was, you know, you kind of run into walls. With GIS, I got sent over to the planning department to go talk to the planning professors because maybe one of them would take an afternoon to show me how to use some mapping tools, these sorts of things. So it was great when we realized Alexandra, well, first we realized she knew how to use Zotero and came in to do this Zotero workshop for our students, but it became apparent she knew a lot more than that. and had these great resources within the library. And it had never occurred, and Janine, you can probably speak to this better than I can, you've been around longer, but I don't think it ever occurred to anyone in a department that the library would be the place to go for help with digital projects, right? It was always supposed to be these other sorts of places in the university. So I think that's been one huge hurdle that we've jumped over already. And something we've talked about a lot is how the library can do not necessarily better outreach, because I don't think it's all the onus is not all on the librarians, but how we can make faculty who are in departments like ours that don't have a lot of expertise or experience in these areas but are very interested in getting involved, how we can get to these resources better without just getting lucky to have a graduate student in the department who works in the library to find out about it. And I think our English department has these kinds of problems, other humanities departments. So that has been, that's been really valuable. We've been talking about all sorts of collaboration we can do, both for individual projects, which Janine will talk about, and I don't actually know. We haven't talked much about the spatial history stuff. I don't think the librarians are going to be supporting GIS, but for teaching as well, it's become apparent that we can do things like hold perhaps a one-day digital humanities boot camp, in which some of the people from the library can actually come over and do hands-on work with our graduate students and our faculty to help the faculty learn some really basic tools so we can then teach some of the very basic stuff ourselves as we build these projects up. And another thing that, aside from the public history component and my own research, and our graduate students, my advisees who are very interested in developing some sort of digital presence and experience in these areas before they go in the job market, is we have service learning classes in our department. I teach a history of Detroit class, for instance, and the community partners that we work with increasingly are museums and cultural institutions, and the type of work they want us doing for them is increasingly digital as well. And they have some of the infrastructure for that, but they don't have all of the infrastructure for that. They expect the faculty and the students to come in with basic kind of literacy in these things to use their platforms. And so that's another area in which the library is really going to be essential in a way to let me teach classes, train me to teach these tools and classes that I wouldn't be able to teach otherwise, that would limit the kinds of partnerships we could have with institutions in the area. Because it turns out when people want you to curate an exhibit, they often mean an online exhibit now, not an in-person exhibit, I'm discovering. So I'm very early on in this stuff, and like I said, aside from reading Prof. Hacker and similar sorts of blogs, I keep bookmarking things and trying to figure out who can teach me how to use them, and it turns out it is the library who can do that, which was incredibly unexpected. So that was sort of my spiel in brief, and I'd be happy to talk in more detail about any of that during the Q&A, but I think Janine probably has the most hands-on, useful case study experience for you.
Part of what I want to talk, obviously what I want to talk about today is how hooking up with people in the library who do digital humanities, digital content things, how that helped me shape the research I'm doing now. But part of this for me is also kind of a road to Tarsus story, because I have always been extremely resistant to computers, digital, online. I went to graduate school when I went to the archives and I wrote everything down on a piece of paper with a pencil. And so for me, this has been a very big shift and a very big transition. So the project that I'm working on, that Alexandra and some of her other colleagues at the library have been helping me with, is I'm doing a big study of Parisian small businesses in the 18th century. And one of the things that has happened since I started graduate school is that you can bring digital cameras into archives, which means that I had a year in the French National Archives. I took 10,000 pictures. And so I have an incredible mass of material. And the question when I came back and I kind of came to my senses was, what do I do with all this stuff? The problem that I came to was I have all this data. I want to be able to not just look at the texture of what's there, but also analyze it as data, figure out what are the big patterns and what are the big issues that arise if you look at 10,000 business contracts or 10,000 marriage contracts. The only thing I knew how to do with this was to make an Excel spreadsheet. So I started making an Excel spreadsheet But it became clear that this was not going to get me very far. I mean, it would give me some idea of years when there's more going on, years when there's less going on, but this was not going to be a very powerful tool for doing digital analysis. Now, at this time when I was sort of grappling with what to do with this incredibly rich source material I had, Alexandra came to our department, gave us this sort of tutorial on Zotero and EndNote, and offered to come and give some individual advice, which we then asked her to do. And through that collaboration, I found a much more fruitful set of tools to bring to the research that I'm doing. The two tools that I'm using now, and I have a research assistant who's helping me with this, are FileMaker Pro and Gephi. And these are very basic things that pretty much everybody knows about, except I didn't know about it before this point. And so what is this data going to allow me, what is this going to allow me to do with my data? Well, first of all, it's going to allow me to organize it, to get a handle on exactly what I have, how much I have, what is the change over time, which is one of the things historians are interested in. What are, if you look geographically across the city of Paris, what are differences that you see? So FileMaker Pro has given my research assistant and I a really good sense of what is actually in these contracts and what is the change over time that happens. It allows us to have a much greater level of detail than any entry in a spreadsheet could allow, and we are continuing to learn more about how to, cross-reference different elements of these contracts and these datas. So for instance, we have inventories that list each will, each marriage contract, each rental contract that a family member signed before he or she died, and we're able to cross-reference that with other wills, marriage contracts, rent contracts from that neighborhood, from that year, from whatever profession those people are in. Also, FileMaker is incredibly useful as far as allowing notes on each entry, and just to allow us to both have the ability to make substantive comments, but also to have this sort of bird's eye view of what's going on there. All kinds of documents can be imported into FileMaker. So we've attached different Word documents, we've attached images, these digital images, these pictures that I've taken, as well as PDFs of articles or material that's relevant to the analysis. And so it's just made the project much more organized, much more feasible, and all using fairly accessible digital tools. Now, because FileMaker is basically a business piece of software, it's actually been really useful for me looking at this material and trying to trace out business transactions in the 18th century. And that's been a bit of a revelation for my project, is that obviously things are incredibly different before the French Revolution, but there's also these kind of commonalities of how people practice business in different times and different places. The software has features that track different elements of inventory, so we can do some different material culture analysis by plugging in some of the objects that are found in people's homes. And so it gives us a sense of the flow of goods, the flow of wealth, the ebb and flow of a family's prospects as they go from, getting married to having children to near death. Also, FileMaker has just been incredibly useful as far as we have remote access to the database. We can use it on tablets, we can use it on laptops, and so we just have a lot of access to the data. Now, FileMaker has allowed us to kind of zoom in on these relationships, on the texture of the lives of these merchant families. In contrast, Gephi, which is an online software project, it has allowed us to begin to make a network a network visualization of all these families. So the idea behind putting these two different kinds of software together is that FileMaker will give us a sense of who we have, who they are, where they live, how rich are they, how poor are they. Gephi will give us a sense of how they're all connected. Gephi is meant to allow the visualization of different kinds of social networks, and it's been helping us to think about the hierarchies among these different business families in the 18th century, the flows of credit, the flows of goods, how close different families are, how dense the networks are in certain places, how thin they are in different places, how central certain individuals or certain families are to a broader network, and how they use different kinds of contracts to create those networks. So for example, one of the preliminary findings we've had is that marriages are the central glue in creating these networks, even more so than credit contracts. That credit contracts follow marriages rather than marriages following credit contracts. This is a kind of finding there is no way that you could figure out if you don't have these digital tools and put your stuff in there. And you know, the other thing is using Gephi, using FileMaker has allowed me to sort of think about talking to people who do social network analysis. So my hope is that when this project is finished, that I'll be able, through the use of digital tools, that it will be something that will be of interest, maybe not just to historians, but maybe methodologically more broadly. And let me just say one last thing. It occurred to me as we were driving down here from Detroit that it's rather lame to be the digital humanities and not have any images. But you know, I was going to bring images of my FileMaker card entries, but I didn't think that would be terribly stimulating. We haven't yet gotten any Gephi networks that are big enough, so maybe next time. But this project and the way this project is unfolding and the kinds of findings that I'm making are things that would not have been possible without the collaboration of the library staff, and in particular Alexandra, who was able to not just point me to what are the fruitful kinds of software that I could use, but how to use it. You know, I had read about different kinds of software. I had no idea where to start. And just to echo something that Tracy said, our information technology people, they don't do this. And so it never would have occurred to me that this is something that the library was meant to do. But it has been extremely useful to me in terms of my research and getting this project going to be able to make this collaboration with the library.
So we'd like to open it up to Q&A. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, ideas, we'd love to hear how your institutions are handling these types of partnerships as well. Thank you.
So I have a question. So you started using these tools after having already collected all of the data.
Yes, which probably was not the right way to go about it.
Yeah, and that's my question.
Yeah.
Is there now that you've sort of know the tools, would you have done anything different in your data collection at the time?
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing is I think I would have started organizing this data. Like I came home, I was like incredibly fortunate to have this year sabbatical to do archival research. And I did absolutely no analysis or organization while I was there. Partly because I was just focused on doing as much research as I could, but partly because I didn't really know how I would organize it. And so rather than sitting down and thinking about it, I just thought, I'll fix that later, which meant that I came home with just this piles of data. And I also think, like, I have questions that I could have asked while I was there that I now have to go back to answer. So absolutely, you know, I think, like, if I have students who go to do research, I would absolutely tell them my story is a story of what not to do. And that, you know, and now that I have familiarity with this, I would definitely think about not just what are the questions I want to ask of the past, but how do I want to organize it? And, you know, when I went to graduate school a long time ago, none of this was on the radar. I mean, you know, this is my second project. I wrote a dissertation, which is now a book. The whole research process is completely different. Like just the whole digital, online, you know, there's a possibility for the kind of data now that just was not possible when I went to school. So I almost feel like it's been like a retraining to figure out how to do this. And so, you know, whenever I do design another project, this has been a learning experience for me.
So how would you recommend that for other people doing research that were able to make those connections with the people that could help them before they even start collecting the data? So how do we institutionalize sort of that so that it happens at the front end rather than at the back end?
Yeah.
Well, at the library, we're certainly hoping to make our services more discoverable. This is a new set of services that we suspected that there was a demand for among the faculty, and especially in other humanities departments, the English department. There are some other digital scholarship projects going on. One is rather high profile, the Layers Project, Cultural Stories of Detroit Neighborhoods. And I know that they have also partnered with the English Liaison to do that. But we have not formally created a web page yet or LibGuide, and those are definitely in the works, putting some tools and tutorials and things like that together, but also making it discoverable. And also the way we're structuring our liaison department, our liaison services at Wayne, is to have, for instance, I mentioned that we have our scholarly publishing staff and we have digital publishing staff. All the liaisons are not expected to be experts in these systems, but it is hoped that liaisons will be able to bring these messages to the department that these services are available, whether through instructional services, through communications with faculty, just listening to what people are interested in and knowing that the services are available to the library. But those would be our two main ways of making these discoverable, through the website and through the existing liaison program. And I have to say that many of our liaisons do have pretty solid relationships with the departments that they serve. So
I would say one development that has happened since I've been teaching that helps with this is greater emphasis on interdisciplinary collaboration. Because when I went to school, my PhD is in history. I didn't take a single class outside of history. So I had no idea what other social scientists were doing, what humanists were doing. And so now when I advise students, I always send them to other departments. And I think other departments don't just have different intellectual insights, but they have different methodologies. Sociologists are far more forward-looking in terms of using digital tools, working with data. And so I think, in terms of if I'm advising students, I advise students to go talk to other social scientists who are far more advanced in terms of how to bring the digital into their scholarship than most historians are.
And can I say too, I think that at least at Wayne State, and this was true, I went to NYU for graduate school, and this seemed to be true at NYU as well, there are endless courses on using course management systems. Yeah. And if we could get a little, not replace that, because that's very important, particularly for people who are just starting out, but to offer maybe once a semester or so, some kind of workshop, similar workshop that's easy to sign up for online. It's so easy to go to a Blackboard workshop at Wayne State, but to get access to anything else can be kind of tough. So something that just kind of outlines, we're going to familiarize you with different types of digital tools, both for your own research and for your courses. Because I think, for me at least, a lot of my interest in this has been driven by my students' interest in it and trying to figure out how to bring it into the classroom, particularly for graduate students. And so I think that would be one way to reach faculty quickly.
I think this would be a great fit for any sort of Office of Teaching and Learning that you have. And ours currently has not embraced teaching these tools, but they are housed in the library. And they are aware of these tools. But that would be another natural fit. And also a place where, as Tracy said, faculty look for training in these tools, and a place where they would seek it out, even if they don't initially make that library connection right away.
What kind of interactions have you had or requests have you had from lower level undergraduates for this kind of support?
I've had, my most experience with undergrads comes from doing instruction in large multi-section courses and at the reference desk. I have not had any, quite frankly, and that's me. But we have a large distributed library system, and I don't know about other liaisons. I would assume there's interest, and it would be worth doing outreach to that population as well.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Steve from the College of Worcester. I was really struck by Janine and Tracy's realization that the library was a potential center for getting help on digital projects. And I'm wondering, first of all, why was it unexpected that the library was a place to get help with digital projects? And I'm interested in that question because I'm wondering how, kind of riffing off of Roger's question, like how can the library institutionalize its reputation as a center for digital learning and not just a traditional reputation of being kind of like a repository of analog information?
Well, I think one very simple answer to your first question is, the library website, what do you see when you log in? You see the catalog. And so you think of the library, okay, I'm going to go to the library when I need a book or when I need a journal article. And so part of that is just sort of, that's what I always knew. And part of it is the way that the library presented itself, that a lot of this knowledge is sort of buried under the other stuff that the library does. And so I would say part of it was my own neglect to dig into what the library had beyond the catalog and beyond, online journal articles and things like that. And part of it, frankly, I think is that, before, Alexandra is a graduate student in our program, honestly, I think if she were not, we would still be in the dark about many of the things that the library is doing. And, part of it is that I think there are some librarians who have been in their positions for a long time, and this is not what they think of as one of their primary responsibilities. So part of it is just sort of my remaining with those received ideas of what is a library? It's a place where there are books. And part of it is the library does not reflect always what it does. And I would say that the biggest change I think a library can do to make this apparent is just change the main page of the website. If you go on and there's a catalog, well, that's what the library does. And then if you dig in, there's guides and handbooks, and you click and you click and you click, and then you find something, even going to the question about undergraduates are not going to click 5 links to figure out what they need. So I think part of it is just the way that the information is presented.
And Wayne State we have not advertised these services very widely either. So I'm not surprised that faculty aren't aware that we have these skills and capabilities at the library. But it's something that we want to develop and move forward with.
And I think I have to say, so I got hired in 2011, and when I went on campus interviews to places other than Wayne, I mean, they always take you to the library at a campus interview, right? And a lot of the other places that I interviewed had sort of digital scholarships, either specialists that they pointed out to you, or they had centers on some of these campuses for these things. And so I kind of arrived, and that wasn't something that wasn't mentioned at orientation. It wasn't mentioned, when I came to interview. Nobody in the department was doing that kind of stuff. I mean, we're a history department, right? Like, we're about as low tech as it's going to get anywhere in the university, frankly. And so people weren't doing that sort of stuff. And so it just seemed like and then OTL, Office Teaching and Learning, wasn't doing it. The computer technology people weren't doing it. And so it just seemed like something we probably didn't have, right? We're a poorly funded public university. It seemed reasonable that was maybe a thing we didn't have. And as Janine said, it's not on the library website. So I think part of it is actually getting to faculty when they're arriving. Make sure you have someone at faculty orientation, sure you have someone at TA orientation for graduate students and these sorts of things to talk about these kinds of services. And figure, just so people know that they might be buried somewhere, and it might be a while before you can get that on the front page of the website. But reaching out at sort of the moment of first contact, perhaps. Undergrads too, right? Orientation for undergrads would be a way to do that.
Definitely.
And the library, the amount of resources that we put into our digital scholarship infrastructure, we hope will reflect demand. And currently, we don't know what demand is among faculty, particularly in the humanities and social sciences, for these types of tools. So we probably are not going to hire a digital specialist anytime soon. I don't know, maybe our dean has plans for that, but I don't know of them at this point. And so we're probably going to rely on our existing structure and the way we allocate our staff resources and financial resources. And we'll probably just develop a separate set of programs and probably do it on a one-on-one consulting basis rather than having a specialist. But that's another option for staffing.
We have another 10 minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I suppose we could end the session early. Oh, we've got a question.
So I have more questions about what would be compelling as a cell that so it's sort of a circular question. If you think of the libraries as books, and we show up at new faculty orientation where you're being inundated with all kinds of new services that are available, and someone says, hey, the libraries are here, and then all we talk about are new and emerging research support or teaching support, because every library I've worked in, they do some iteration of that. I fear that we will end up with information overload, because that is what we are prone to do as librarians. And so I guess I'm trying to think of what would be the compelling thing to make you rethink what the library can and should do for you. Not to, throw the world question there at you.
You mean like a sort of two-sentence way of communicating to people what you can do beyond books and articles?
Maybe, because I think the thought that we have is everything that you would think of a library, we couldn't provide for you. So there is you need to have the resources and know that you can get the resources, because quite frankly, I'm at Ohio State, but at my campus, telling people you have interlibrary loan, which seems to me as the most basic service, they're like, wait a minute, you provide
revelation.
articles for free? Is not atypical. That is not an atypical response. So then to say, and we can do GIS, and we can help you find tools for digital humanities, sort of rocks their world, but also, how we do this multi-plane system where we have to tell you we have all the things you would expect for the library, plus we have all these other things that you wouldn't expect. So I sort of have this moment of, and you're getting it at a point of new faculty orientation where you're like, thank you, no more information.
Handouts are great with that. So seriously, like that's what I kept from new faculty orientation. I didn't take very good notes, and anyone who gave me a handout, I held on to, and then I could find them again. But I think in general, and I was thinking about this actually on the way down too, because we recently got, yesterday or something, we got an email from our grants office reminding us of some new thing they can do, pre-grant review or pre-submission review, and which I'd forgotten about, but I'd heard about. And they actually seem to be sending something out once a semester now, just to remind the faculty of what these programs are and what they can do. And something that big, at least I think probably I can speak for our faculty when I say this, if we get frequent reminder emails about something, once a semester, once a year, we might remember, right, a little more than if we're told once, or if we have to go look at I think Janine's point about having it on the homepage of the website is a really good one. If what you see is the catalog over here and other services here, but you don't have to click through 3 links that say other services, and then it breaks out into 5 other kinds of other services, and maybe you don't know what 2 of those are exactly, so you don't go looking under them. But I think just really simple, kind of straightforward bulk mass emails or handouts of these kinds of things that remind you in big bullets of what the library can do beyond what you expected. For a historian anyways, like what I would expect from a library is interlibrary loan. Like it's astonishing to me that people wouldn't know that was something they could get, but I think it's probably different by discipline, right? Like what you go to the library for in the first place. So I expect interlibrary loan, I expect books, and I expect online journal subscriptions. And the digital stuff seemed very much to me like it should belong to something with technology in the title, right? And so I think anything you can do beyond just the website or beyond forcing people to click through to things to remind them in that way is helpful.
And thinking about orientation, what might be a way to sort of have a shortcut to all that is just say, we do all these basic things. We have many other services we can provide. Here's a contact person. Get in touch with us about your particular questions. Because that's essentially how this whole thing started. I never would have really known at some big orientation what to ask about or ask for, but having a contact person and saying, this is what I'm doing, what can you tell me? And then Alexandra said, well, I can tell you this, and then here's somebody else who specializes in FileMaker, and he has helped me figure this out immensely, that I don't necessarily need at some orientation a whole list of every software that you support. What I need is a name that I can call when I'm sitting down thinking about my project, and then get in touch to ask about what I need, where I'm not being inundated and being asked right on the spot, well, do you need this, do you need that? So it seems like setting up a kind of opening for further dialogue or further communication would be the most useful tool, was the most useful tool for me.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, when I was saying come to do faculty orientation, I wouldn't want to know every piece of software either, because I wouldn't know what they meant. But knowing, hey, the library is the place, if you're interested in digital projects, the library is a place to start. That much information would have been useful, along with the contact idea would have been great too.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
All right, well, if there's no more questions, please help me thank our panelists again.